Good evening. Welcome. My name is Vic Vaccaro. Welcome to the February seminar. You have an excellent program tonight, as you're going to see. I'd like to remind you, however, that we do have some raffle tickets that you can purchase. We have one winner that's going to get a $100 gift certificate. Are you purchasing them? It's already done? Okay. And so it should be an exciting program, but Jeff will be there all night, so you can get the raffle tickets. And next to Jeff is a sign-up sheet, and we'll have name tags so that when you after the meeting's over, if you want to hang around and talk, we can know who you are. Anyway, this is the agenda for tonight. We're going to start with fish stories, and it's an interesting story that we're going to have for that. And then we're going to have Frank Woods come up here and kick off our fundraiser for the year. And then we have Tom Rude talking about the banquet that's going to take place in May. And then the reason why you're all here is to hear our guest speaker, Cameron Atkinson. And he's excited to be here, and we're excited to have him because it's a tremendous topic that a lot of people can be interested in. And then we'll ask Dave DeVore, president of this chapter, to wrap up the meeting for us. So this is Fishing Stories. Fishing Stories are usually your segment. Does anybody have any stories they'd like to share with the rest of us? No. Is this you? I'd like you to meet Bill McBride. Yes, what was it? Saturday, wasn't it? Yeah, Saturday. I was coming home from Deer Creek, and this gentleman was fishing with his family. And I said, "Did you catch anything?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Would you like to share it with me?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, wait." I said, "I'm Vic Vaccaro from CCA." He said, "Oh, then I'll share it with you." And so, come on, Bill, tell him what you did.
Wow, that's fantastic, all these fish I got. But it wasn't always like that. I started fishing in these ponds in 1979. Mom and Dad lived here, moved here in 79 to retire and play golf. And as a 17-year-old, I started fishing these ponds. And I remember in 79 and 80, I'm not catching anything. And maybe the ponds were very young then. And I was using a lot of saltwater stuff. And Mom one day bought me a plastic worm. And I took the plastic worm instead of using Salty Dog and caught a big fish. And so it was, from then on, I started using culprit worms, doing the worm thing. And, I take Dad's golf cart when he was out of town. They don't want me to use their golf cart. So and that's how I got around. I learned to stay out of the way of golfers. I learned to stay out of the way of gators. Many times I will walk up on ponds and get right down to the bank. A big gator would just, they were right there on the edge of the pond. And I caught some fish that were, okay. And I never did catch anything like this using the worms. Yeah, we're true. So in 1992, Mickey Mouse rod and practiced in the driveway with a little rubber weight to get the casting thing down, and took her out to a pond with a rooster tail, and she caught 6 or 7 bass, and I caught 3, and it was game on. She wasn't always stuck on fishing. As let's go fishing. No, my friends are coming over to play Barbies. So, but she did go fishing quite often. And then down through the decades, I would take every nephew and every niece to go fishing at Thanksgiving or Christmas, and they would catch a fish. And when they were older, as adults, they would say, every one of us in this room has a picture with Uncle Bill holding a fish. So I tried to mentor as much as I could. And then I moved here in 2004 and with my own golf cart. Didn't need permission to take that one out, and started fishing a lot and started using not the worms, but a Storm product, if I have it here, curl-eyed minnow. And it was driving the bass nuts. So it's like a little lure like that. And you take it out of the plastic wrapping or the container it comes in, it looks like when it's brand new that you could place it on the cracker and put some hot sauce on it. It looked that real. It just, so, and that's what I caught these fish on, except for the one with my grandfather. And they came down to fish for a couple years. And every time we go fishing, we wouldn't catch anything. Much as I try, all the methods that I used. And we went to Lake Lanier, and I didn't know how to fish that lake. We jigged for stripers. We used crickets for brim, nothing. And, you know, we would go fishing, we'd catch a little fish like that. And at the end of the last trip before this one, he said, as an 8-year-old, I never caught a fish in my whole life. And no pressure, Grandpa. No pressure there, you know. So we went out to this pond here, and this is not all the same pond, but we used the minnow and the rooster tail, which is what he caught one on, and he finally caught his fish. So, and then my daughter caught her fish on the pearl-tailed minnow, and they weren't really up to the point of lipping the fish or unhooking the fish and presenting, especially my daughter. So that's why you see me holding the fishes. So, you know, 40 years or so wrapping up fishing these ponds. It's a great place to fish. Wasn't so much in 1980, but here we are, 2022. I did. Now you can see that I'm a freshwater fisherman. I don't fish the saltwater ponds. And just, you know, everybody's got their thing. And, you know, I showed a picture of the big fish that my daughter had. Somebody will show me a picture there. Here's a spot-tailed bass. Well, yeah, sure. It's a different species and a, you know, a different, you know, type of water. So I've always went for fresh water. And then I caught the big one, and Vic came along and said, send me a picture. Thank you very much.
Takes a lot of courage to come up here and share experiences with you. I didn't realize you have 40 years experience. Anyway, I'm passing around the lagoon fishing guide. Some of you may have one already. If you don't, this will give you a great idea. But if you want to know where to fish, whether the lagoon is freshwater, saltwater, it even has the different types of fish that are in some of the lagoons. And it also has a segment on saltwater fishing as well, inshore saltwater fishing. So you can get the lagoon guide in the back of the room. After the meeting, we have Hal Evans back there. Enjoy it. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to invite Frank Woods up. Where are you, Frank? Oh. So Frank was going to kick off the fundraising meeting, and I guess I'm kicking it off. I should have read it before I'm going to be doing this. So anyway, so we're starting a fundraising campaign, and at the moment, I think we have 1% of what our budget is, and I believe we've budgeted $25,000 as an annual amount that we should raise, and that money goes towards funding all the different activities that you see there on the right. And so there are different ways that you can donate money. You can give a check, you can go online, you can pay by PayPal or whatever. But anyway, we'd appreciate any contribution you all may want to make to encourage us to continue the efforts that we're doing. All right. So some of the monies that we do, that we raise, we stock the ponds with. And one of the ponds that we stock, many of you know, is the kids fishing lagoon. And once a year we have a kids fishing day, and we usually attract anywhere between 50 and 150 kids, and they catch fish. And within the hour and a half, a couple of years ago, they've caught 500 fish. I mean, it's really amazing that this lagoon that is almost self-sustaining at the moment with the way in which the people who are running this thing are taking care of it. At this event, Dave, you were at this event. You want to say a couple of things about it? You don't have to come up to do this.
All the work, the three of us that were working it, the kids are running around in t-shirts. Of course, they have hot bodies, doesn't bother them. So we had about 50 people show up, younger parents on the island. They caught about 30 fish. They had a great time. Now, we had a similar event the year before, and 80 to 100 kids showed up. And we had one volunteer. That was absolutely overwhelming. Insight, God bless you. But like Vic says, we had the kids fishing derby. We've had them for about 25 years in a row right now. And up until about 5 years ago, we only used that lagoon 2 hours to 3 hours a year. And since that time, with the donations from the residents here on the island, we've enhanced the lagoon. We've been able to enhance the lagoon. We've added the pavilion, the outdoor education center. We have a shed over there. We have 85 rods of reels for kids to use. And the lagoon is used 365 days a year. Kids over there and enjoy it. And people walking by, and we have a gumball machine, you turn it, food comes out of your hand, you throw out the water, the fish react to it. It's fun. And then we have the 5 feeders around the perimeter, and they go off, and right now, I think it's 12:30 every day. They'll go off, and the fish really react to it. It's quite exciting. So if you have visitors down there, get yourself, it's just a fun thing to do. So that's where the money goes that we're raising right now. It stays on the island. This money does. We reinvested. We put 45,000 feeder fish in the freshwater lagoon. That's a lot of fish.
Thanks, Dave.
And stop now?
Yes. So this was a birthday party for an 8-year-old, and it was really spectacular. Now I'd like to invite Tom Root up to talk a little bit about the banquet.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have an annual banquet that we put on here on the island, the CCA Skidaway chapter. As part of our CCA Georgia chapter, which is part of CCA National. So CCA National has about 140,000 members, and we're located in all the states surrounding the perimeter of the U.S. Obviously, all around the ocean fronts. Texas was where we originated, 55,000 members in Texas. So we have about, now we have chapters in Georgia, and we on Skidaway Island are the biggest chapter. So one of the things that we do every year is put a banquet on. This year's banquet is going to be May 3rd. This was the banquet we were going to have in September of last year, but for COVID reasons, due to abundance of caution, we postponed it, and now we've got it scheduled for the 3rd of May. It'll be at the Palmetto Club at 6 p.m. start, and it's a great evening. How many of you have been to one of our banquets before? Great. I mean, it's just an outstanding time. We have about 200 people come and enjoy themselves. We have great food. We have 2 auctions that we do. We have a silent auction. We have about 90 items on the silent auction, and then we have about 20 items on our live auction. And all of this money that we raise here is for CCA Georgia. So May 3rd, mark it down. Some of you have already registered. Go to our website, ccaskidaway.org, and on there you can register for this event online. It's $200, $205 for a couple, $110 for an individual. Great evening entertainment. I guarantee you'll have fun. And sign up, bring some friends. It's a great night out. You do. You get a membership. That's me. That's me, right? Okay. Yeah, you do get a membership for the price of admission, $35 a year, get you a membership with CCA. That's a regular membership. An associate membership, if you're a couple, is $25, I think it is now, or $20 or $25 for an associate membership. So if you attend our banquet, you'll both, as a couple, you'll both get a membership. If you are intending to come to the banquet and you want to join, we have membership applications in the back. And I think you can just sign up and you can get your membership. One of the things that you get as a member, every 2 months you get a Tide magazine. And this is a great magazine. It talks about fishing all over the country, lots of fishing stories. And several of them, we've had articles in from CCA Georgia. So it's a great magazine and it's nationally. So come and join us. We do this seminar here once a month for I think 10 months. We're off in the summer, but we really like to have you join us and be supportive of CCA. So thanks for coming tonight.
While we're off in the sessions in the summer for kids, those are wonderful. If you miss a meeting and you really want to, and you like the topic, but you were out of town, you can go online, go to YouTube, and capture that meeting. You may have to look at this ugly for a while, but you'll get to the meat of the project with the presentations that are there. So I think it's very, very worthwhile. And now the reason why you're all here is to listen to Cameron Atkinson to talk about Oyster. Cameron is in a master's program trying to at was it Savannah State, and he's doing this project. I can't believe it's such a detailed project that he's working on. That I'm trying to get his presentation. Okay, that he's working on so that we can benefit in the long run. I'm going to podium over to Cameron, and I'd like you to welcome him, please. Really? Why don't you kill me? That one. Well, then hold on. Let me get to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the intro, and thank you all for being here tonight. It's great to be able to talk a little bit about the project, and it really is close to home here at Skidaway. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get into it and what we've seen here, and also got an opportunity for you guys to get involved at the end and going forward to be a part of this project as well. So as you mentioned, my name is Cameron Atkinson. I am a master's student at Savannah State University. I've been in Savannah since June of 2020. So been here for a little bit. I actually was down in Brunswick before that doing my undergraduate at College of Coastal Georgia. So I've been on the coast of Georgia for a while. I'm from Rome, Georgia, which is up in the northwest corner of the state. So I'm not originally from the coast, but have kind of been here for a number of years now and done a number of different things for research. And this is what I'm currently doing at Savannah State. So oyster reefs are very important. A lot of you that fish understand that, with the understanding that oysters a lot of times mean fish, the fish habitat component associated with them. But there's a number of other different ecosystem services. There's a whole list I could include, but some of the more popular ones, the ones that are talked about more often, is some of the water quality things that go along with them. They're able to filter out a lot of water. One adult oyster can filter 50 gallons of water a day, which is pretty impressive. They help to keep the water quality great in the estuaries. Additionally, another really big thing, and I actually already talked about it a little bit tonight, is the ability of oysters to kind of stabilize shorelines and hopefully mitigate the effects of erosion. So those are a number of different things that oysters do. We are more so interested in that fish habitat component, and you'll kind of see that here as I dip into some of the we're looking at in our project. So in Georgia, oyster reef restoration has started to take off in the last probably 20, 30 years. There's been kind of a big decline in oyster populations throughout time. Throughout the 1900s, we saw a big reduction. There's about an 85% reduction in oyster densities worldwide. So overharvesting led to that, which led to the loss of a lot of those ecosystem services I mentioned prior. And so in Georgia, the method that's been utilized for a number of years is using oyster shell bags, which you see here, which is just simply a plastic bag that's meshed, and you put oysters in there. Some of you maybe have participated in a shell bagging event. So if you have, good on you. You've done a great job and helped restore reefs. So that's the method that's utilized. Those shell bags, there's probably about 20, 25 of those that are placed on wooden pallets and put out in the reef or put out in the environment. So you can see that being done here. This is down in Brunswick, Georgia. This is coastal Georgia's DNR. They use this barge and go out and put the pallets out there with the shell bags and hopefully grow reefs. One of the things that we're seeing, and it's slightly concerning in the call for some research, is that there's been quite a few failed reefs in Georgia using this method. So looking at this picture, you can see at the base here, the remnants of an oyster pallet reef or oyster bag reef. So these are just the very tips of shells, and you can imagine there's supposed to be a wooden pallet way back here. But due to kind of the environment we have here in Georgia with the high energy environment with the tides, salt sediment, a lot of those reefs are covered up and not able to grow and recruit over time. So due to that, and associated with the fact that there's not a lot of shell out there and there's a high price associated with that shell, there's need to kind of look at some other materials. And so that's kind of the crux of what our project is looking at and figuring out, okay, what is an alternative substrate that we can use in Georgia that's successful at growing reefs, as well as providing fish habitat and other services. So that material is called oyster catcher. I'm gonna dip away from. This is a biodegradable plant-based material, which uses jute fibers. So my wife uses them to put on Christmas wrapping and her wrapping paper and all this stuff to make it look nice. So that's the only use I know for it, but there's a ton of other uses for it. It's just twine, more or less. And so that's dipped into cement and then wet formed into a number of different designs. So we use a tabletop design that you'll see in a minute. Here it's being used in kind of this little interlocking sections. So that's kind of what the material looks like. Feel free after the talk to come up and check it out and look at it up close. Be careful, it is kind of, there's some areas that affect you if you're not careful. Yeah, just be careful when you're passing it. There are some jagged spots on it. Yeah, so that's the oyster catcher material. It's been used in a number of states successfully. So it's been used in Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida. The material actually was graded up by a group in North Carolina associated with the University of North Carolina. But has not been tested in Georgia yet. So that's what we're interested in doing, is looking at that material and figuring out how it works here in the state. So that kind of brings us to the two big objectives first, seeing how these two materials compare at growing and developing successful oyster reef restorations, and also how nekton, which are fish, shrimp, crabs, anything that moves in the water, how they're utilizing this oyster reef habitat. And that's particularly impactful for a number of us here, including myself, that are fishermen and fisherwomen, because we like to fish those oyster reefs. And so these oyster reef restoration projects can be very useful for us as we're trying to improve our fishing habitat here in the state. So this is real close to home. Usually I give this talk in areas that aren't so familiar with the area. So it's great to have an audience that knows exactly what we're talking about. Many of you have probably seen some of our stuff out in the water, crossing the bridge over to the island. So in May of 2021, we built a total of 6 different reefs. We built 3 reefs of each different material. So we had 3 bag shell reefs, three oyster catcher reefs. And those are all built here along the shoreline of the state park. If you've been out walking on the state park, you've likely been able to see it because you can actually at low tide see these reefs at the edges of those walking trails as they go out toward the river. Or if you've been on the water, you've likely seen them as well. Additionally, along with our restored reefs, we picked 3 different natural reef sites that serve as our controls for the study to see how the restored reefs are mimicking or comparing to natural reefs that are already out there. So here's just an example of each of the 3 reef types. The first, we have our bag shell reef type, which is kind of like I mentioned, the traditional approach and what's been used in Georgia for a number of years, but has some of those concerns. Here's the oyster catcher material. So as you can see, those are kind of the tabletops, look like little coffee tables that you can just press down into the mud with their 4 legs. And then here's just an example of one of our natural reefs. We try to select those natural reefs in a similar size to the reefs that we've constructed. Try to make them as similar as possible for our studies, so we're having good controls there. Yeah. The tables. Yeah, the tables. Yeah. That do think, imagine that little leg right there. We just kind of broke it off from the example. Yeah. So those are the 3 different reef types, and you'll get to see kind of what they look like now. This was right as they were built, so kind of get to see what they look like now here in a few slides. So now our sampling approach, like I mentioned, really interested in how the oysters are doing, really interested in how the fish and crabs and shrimp and neck ton are using it. So first, looking at some of the oyster stuff here, we sample that quarterly, every 3 months or so. We go out and I do a number of different things. We sample 3 different sections of the reef, so the lower, middle, and upper, to see there's some differences as you get from the channel to the shoreline there. We do a number of things on the oyster reef. So we count the little spat that they were treated. Now we this time of year, after the first growing season, December, we kind of counted the adults and had a few spat there. But in our first count in September, we had a lot of spat, as you can imagine, as they were first put out. Additionally, beyond counting every little oyster, it takes a little bit of time to look at the little ones. We measured 25 random oysters. We also do a measurement called rugosity, which is just a real fancy name or a word to say how tall the reef is per se. So we basically stretch this chain out. You can hear me doing that here. Stretch this 2-meter long chain. You know it's that length, and then you kind of push down the chain into the little holes that the reef makes and over the top of the oysters, and measure the actual length of that chain after you do that to get an idea of kind of the complexity of that reef. And that's kind of important to show that the reef is growing taller and being able to overcome some of those sedimentation issues. But also for us that are really interested in fish, that structural complexity leads to better fish habitat. Additionally, kind of a neat thing that a lot of people are interested about our project is we have a drone that we use to fly over the reefs and get aerial imagery, which allows us to kind of quantify the lateral and vertical growth of the reef over time, see just how they're comparing it from the time that they're built to the end of this project, which is coming up in December. So I've got a couple graphs here to show you some of the differences in the oyster reef development that we've seen. So kind of the most provocative result is the big difference here between the oyster densities, the number of at the oyster catcher reef compared to the bag shell and natural. So this new material is growing these very dense reefs, a lot of oysters. Some of the images are pretty striking. The images don't really do it justice. If you've been out there, and I encourage you, if you're ever out there, you can look at the 2 different types and see just how many oysters are on. But obviously, there's very significant difference here as well as the other materials. In terms of length, as you expect, the natural reefs have adult oysters that haven't been there. They've been there for a lot longer than a year. So those lengths are a lot higher as expected, but again, slightly higher length values that oyster catcher reefs compared to bag shell reefs, which is important because as oysters grow, that allows them to maybe beat some of that sedimentation that's creeping in on them. It can be And then there's got to be that value that just basically collects the height of structures is once again a lot higher for the oyster catcher. Preparing that this new material is very useful here in Georgia, potentially something that going forward that could be used to grow better reefs and better habitat for the state. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're asking how long will it take for this reef to really mature and grow into? Well, so that's a great question. That's something that we're interested in. And you can kind of, in a short time period of this project, which is 2 years, get an understanding of how they're changing. But it's hard to tell at the time with different storm events, with different factors along that shoreline what can go into play. But I mean, this is not even a year in. So you're seeing here with this image what they look like here. We get a lot of oysters in just a 6-month time period. So you can imagine that as these oysters have time to grow, that they're going to basically fill in those whole gaps of where those tables sit. A really pretty dense reef structure and complex. So within a few years, you're going to get a pretty mature reef. And some of the fish stuff that I'm about to present in a second is potentially showing that hey, this reef, that these new reefs are not as caught up to these more established natural reefs, but we're maybe seeing some changes over time to where these new reefs are maturing and establishing themselves. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's a great question. This site was partially selected due to that. So a lot of oyster reef restorations, you're going to want to put them on kind of gradually slope the shoreline. Now, it's not to say you can't do it on a more steep slope, but we wanted to mitigate any impacts of that. So that's part of the reason why we selected the site. Now, I will add to that. Along that shoreline, you have, if any of y'all have ever been out in the marsh, or you probably have been in sites that you sink down up to your hips, and then there's also some sites you can walk pretty well in. And that's the case here. We have some sites that, you'll go down to your hip, and that's actually, this reef is one of those. There's also some sites, especially right there by the state park, that you can walk when you're walking in your front yard. So there is some variation in that. And we have been interested in looking at some of that stuff, but we haven't seen any differences between sites per se in terms of the sediment's hardness or firmness.
So you haven't looked at any of these reefs
no, not yet. We haven't looked at this anywhere outside of the Skidaway River. But, and something I'll talk about in a second, we think that this oyster catch material could be a lot better in those areas compared to just this gradually sloping area. We think that they would really, show themselves to be a lot, more useful. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a number of kind of ideas we have there. And I would think that, and I would argue the most important factor is that there's a little bit more vertical relief, a little bit higher relief from the sediment base itself on these oyster catcher tables. So they're going to have that little area underneath the one. Maybe I can go back here really quick when I talk about this. So they're kind of raised up off the ground a little bit, whereas these are a lot closer. So this kind of opening at the bottom is allowing that sediment to fill in underneath, whereas here you're seeing the sediment kind of fill in on top. So you're seeing here how the sediment's kind of creeped up, whereas it hasn't here. So that is really what appears to be the most impactful thing. It's not necessarily the material. There's been a number of studies that look at material type in terms of recruitment. They've done, everything from these relic oyster shells to concrete to even toilets. There's a number of things I looked at, and recruitment doesn't seem to change that much. Now, I will mention that the relic shell has been shown to be kind of the best in terms of recruiting oysters, and that's why it's one of the reasons why it's used the most. But really, the reason why we're thinking that there's a lot better development of oysters is that it's a little bit more vertical relief than these bag shells are, and that's really what it is. Awesome. Yeah, so I've really hit on everything I wanted to mention here, but I did want to point out once again, you're seeing the sediment begin to creep in here on these bag shell reefs, especially at the back half of the reef structures. And I also want to point out that, you know, you're seeing a lot of oysters here collecting across the lower section of the reef as well as the upper and middle, whereas at these bag shell reefs, and the pictures doesn't really do it too much justice, but you're seeing most of the oysters here right along the edge of the kind of channel side of the reef. But as you creep back toward the shoreline here, there's a lot less oysters and a lot more sediment. That's something that I do want to point out here in these images and also serve you as a reference point. Here's going to be kind of a closer up view of that. So here you're seeing kind of the kind of front section of the reef that I mentioned does have some oysters, but you can kind of see it even in this image, how you get, you know, a lot of oysters here at the front, but not as much as you creep back. Whereas here with the oyster catcher reefs, you're seeing a lot of oysters all over those tables all the way back. So those are some neat pictures. If you're interested in more, we'll check them out on this, or I've got one I can show and chat about it. So that's a really great question and something that we put a lot of thought into. So we use this material, as any of y'all are in construction or surveying, you might have heard of an RTK, which is a real-time kinematic GPS. It's a real expensive GPS, basically. What we did was we went out with that, and it records in a measurement called NAVD 88, which is basically this measurement of elevation along the coastline in relation to sea level. So what we did was we went out and walked from we basically walked from the bank to the creek, basically, over these and had a transect that were able to correlate it on the creek where the density was most thick, basically. And you can kind of see that if you're out, you know, looking at the reef, you can see at the edges kind of thick on there. So what we did was we were able to do that on a number of reefs and get an elevation point in that area where the density was thickest. And then we were able to run a transect at our site and then able to pick out how many meters away from the shoreline for that elevation line. So we're able to put the reefs at that exact elevation where we're seeing the best densities at nearby reefs, try to mitigate some of those impacts of maybe tide, currents, things like that. Yeah.
So what you're really trying to figure out is how much time the oyster spend in the water.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's one of the factors along there that we wanted to keep it, you know, the same, so there wasn't any difference between our reefs.
Is there an ideal?
Okay. Yes, certainly. Yeah. My apologies to people online. I will do that. Right now I'm answering a question about kind of the placement of the reef, how we did that, and some of the factors that we were wanting to maybe mitigate against. And one in particular we're talking about right now is the effect of tide and the time that oysters are underwater. But
so is it better?
So there's so there is kind of a benefit of being in water a certain amount of time and out of water a certain amount of time for the oysters here in Georgia. So our intertidal oysters like to be out of water a certain amount of time, and now that varies between different locations in the marsh. But oysters, I want to mention this, is that oysters are very resilient, and especially our oysters here living in an intertidal environment, they're very resilient to, you know, changes in tide. You know, we'll get a high tide of 6 foot one day, and then a couple of weeks later it'll be 9 foot. So they're out of water different times a lot. So little changes in that isn't going to really affect them. There is a value of being out of the water a lot, or out of the water a certain amount of time and in water a certain amount of time. But the little, you know, minor details of that aren't as impactful, but we did want to make it, you know, as similar as possible to hopefully mitigate against some of those effects. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, I mentioned earlier that the relic shell has been shown to be a little bit better at recruiting oysters. And so the question was, have we thought about using oyster tabby to make a similar structure to the oyster catcher tables? And that's a great question and something that we're very interested in. We have not done that yet, but it's something that would potentially be a great next step to look at here, because as studies have shown, and it's very slightly greater, the difference between the relic shell and other materials. But that would be a very interesting to look at and something to look at and going forward. The only issue with that is, as I mentioned, there is a lot less oyster shell available. So it could, be something that is more costly and something that a lot of, resource managers would look away from, but would be interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, are we working with some of the group at the Skidaway Institute, their shellfish lab that y'all maybe have heard here at your seminars in the past? And the answer is yes, we are working with them. They're one of the collaborators with this project. We don't go out with them much, so we're not necessarily looking at the commercial side that they're looking at. We're more so looking at the fish habitat side. But we aren't working with them. They're very interested in our work. The company that actually makes the oyster catch material in North Carolina, that's one of the things they're looking at is some of the commercial side. So they're well in tune with what we're doing. They go out and see them with us, help us count oysters. So they are very much involved, and I would not doubt if in future years we see this material and some of the other designs that they use, not tabletop, but has some other designs, be used for some commercial applications and going forward. Yeah.
Are these more resistant to settling into the mud than the
So the question was, are the oyster catcher tables more resistant to maybe sinking down into the mud than the back shell roof on the pallet? And the answer is probably. And I say that because some of the data that we're looking at, really that aerial imagery with the drone is really going to be the thing that shows us that. We don't have much data from that. We actually have had a number of issues with our drone. We've actually had it crash recently. So we're kind of putting together pieces with that aspect of the project. So that's really, when we get all that data done and process it, we'll be able to kind of get an idea of that. Now, anecdotally, just looking at it, certainly appears that they're not sinking quite as much. Yeah, it's certainly grown a lot. And I mean, it just appears that those 4 anchor points that it has is in that surface area that it's dispersing is a pretty good match. Now, something I'm interested in looking at is maybe in some of how these other designs are using, how it can maybe be modified to kind of reach a, peak capacity of oysters without sinking. But they're doing really well, and we're pretty impressed with them. Yeah. Yeah, so for this study and the monitoring we're doing, it's going to be continuing till December. That's when the funding for the project will end. I actually will be moving on at that point. But the reefs are going to be there hopefully forever. So they're going to be out there. I wouldn't doubt it if, down the line we have students in Savannah State that go out and monitor them and continue to collect some of the data that we have. But they're going to be out there. They're going to be available to be fished, and they're only going to continue to get bigger unless we have storm events knock them out or boats knock them out or things like that. But they're going to be there. And so in that sense, the scientific aspect of it is until the end of this year, but years and years they'll be out there. Yeah, so the question is, how long have these reefs been out there? So they were built in May of 2021. So we're looking at, what is that, 9 months? So and this picture was taken in early December. So these were taken early December. So yeah, you're seeing how quick they can recruit. Yep. Yeah, so the first question is, how are these reefs impacting fishing? I will curb some of that answer to a minute when I talk about some of the fishing stuff, but the structural complexity that reefs provide are quintessential to fish and their fish habitat. There's numbers of paper that show that structurally complex habitat is a lot more valuable than not. So there's some numbers out there that I can throw out, like, you're increasing like the average catch by like over a couple kilograms per event at sampling oyster reefs themselves opposed to mud banks that have nothing. So that themselves are really impactful. And I'll get into some of the fish results here in a minute to further that. And then the second question was, do oysters make an audible noise when they close? And that's something that I really don't know a great answer to. So I'm not like an oyster biologist. I'm more so a fish habitat person and more a fisheries guy. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, it appears that they do. And I should maybe know that answer. And maybe somebody in the crowd knows it great. It appears that there is a noise out there, and I know exactly. You can hear them. So yeah, so an answer I've heard is that they do have abductor muscles, and those are closing up whenever they're getting exposed out of the water. I don't know the exact scientific answer to that. I'll admit that I don't know too much. I just know the stuff that I know about, so I'm not going to go to claim that they are doing that. It appears that to me that that's potentially the case, and knowing that they do have those muscles, it would make sense that they're closing up. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was the structures we have here, particularly the oyster catcher, I believe, how will they continue to grow over time? Will they grow more laterally, vertically, or both? The answer to that is that they're going to continue to grow both ways, but I would say they're going to grow more so vertically, just because the structure is there and there's just more mass there and more surface for oysters to attach to. So what's going to happen is they're going to kind of grow up, but you are going to see the reefs expand on the edges. Now, the edges are a lot more impacted by the sediment and sedimentation, so that will help slow them down the sides. So they will vertically grow more so. Now, they will reach a point where they kind of level off. You won't see this great, recruitment, but they will change more over time. Yeah, I've got more if I got time. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep going. Yeah. Throw me questions. So this next part is the Necton sampling. I'll try to speed up here. This is our fish, crab, and shrimp sampling. We do this monthly. Every month we go out and a sample will be out there in a couple of weeks doing it. We did it a few weeks ago. Basically, we put out 3 different gear types. We have crab traps, minnow traps, and gill nets. We put those out for approximately 4 hours, 3 hours before high tide, and then 1 hour after we remove them, kind of our general time frame. So those are the 3 types we use. We do 3 crab traps at each reef, 6 minnow traps at each reef, and then 1 gill net. So here, once again, I have some graphs to talk about some of the differences between reef type. So catch per unit effort is just a metric we use a lot in fisheries in terms of looking at how much fish we catch in a certain time period. So generally, we're seeing a higher catch per unit effort at the natural reef sites than the other 2 restored reefs, with the restored reef type of oyster catcher being the most catch per unit effort. I'll talk about some of those reasonings why in a minute, why that's potentially happening. In terms of blue crab size, so their carapace width, very similar throughout the different reef types, kind of expect that. Additionally, here with this is the Shannon-Weiner Diversity Index, which is basically a measure of how many different unique species we're seeing at each reef type. The diversity is slightly higher at the natural reefs than the other 2, with bag shell actually being a little bit greater than oyster catcher. And then here, this is the number of different species we collected at each reef type. The next actually has the most species, oyster catcher and natural more, but the natural we're seeing kind of a greater, the diversity index takes into account beyond just the number of species, how many times they're occurring. So that's why that value is a little bit higher. Fish. This is fish. Yeah, sorry. I'll try and fish the fish, crab, and shrimp here. Yeah, that's what Necton. Necton is things that come in the water, more or less. Additionally, we have another really neat thing that a lot of people really are interested in. It's a kind of new technology. Well, this particular one's new. It's been around for a few years, but it's called acoustic imaging. So it's basically side scan sonar to the max, for those of you that have that on your boats. We use this camera, it's called an Aris, and record underwater. We have this tripod that you see here that we sit it up on and shoot toward the reefs and record, and then we're able to go in the software after the fact and process it and measure the fish and count them. We do that going forward, we're going to do that quarterly. We did it kind of over a 4-month stretch, back to back to back, over the past year. We don't own this equipment, we borrow it from another institution. We got out there and did that. So we record using this software, and I think that I have a video here that's going to play automatically. Yep. Okay. So I may have to play it over, but you can see here our bag shell reefs that's getting covered with the shadow of these menhaden that are swimming through. Here's the bag shell reef. You can see here. It's going to continue playing. So we get a lot of these big old schools of menhaden that are in there, which take me quite a while to go through and count, as you can imagine. Then it's going to be tough to see but you can see right here some smaller fish, maybe trout, something like that swim by. We can't ID the species a lot of times. Sometimes you can. I'll play this over again so you can see this. A lot of times it's missed. Look right here at the very start of the video. See a little bonnethead shark. So things like that we can ID. You can tell gar really easily based on our body shape. But this is an example of some of the imagery that we get from that sampling. So here I'm going to talk about just simply fish, and then compare kind of our gill net catches and our Aaron camera, and look at some trends we're seeing. There's some kind of interesting stuff, and I include them together for that. So first, looking at the number of fish or observing, I guess you could say, for our camera, we're seeing that generally, in terms of abundance, we're seeing a greater abundance at our restored reef types. Now, between year types, we're seeing a flip-flop here. There's some theories there behind that. That time at the end, be glad to discuss. But generally, we're seeing greater abundance of restored reef types compared to the natural reefs. And then the point I had this in there, just this big error bar. If you're familiar with this stuff, big error bar is kind of a red flag. The reason why those error bars, they had one sampling event with the Aris that we had a large school of these little fish that came through that weren't necessarily able to be measured. So we included them, but we wanted to have that caveat, and that's why that occurred. It was just one event that was just a lot of fish, greater than we had anything prior. What I did was kind of get an idea of maybe what these were. As I went through kind of some gillnet catches around that time and minnow crab catches to see what kind of fish we were catching at that same size length measurement I had, and that was some mummichug and white mullet that were going through there. School of that led to these big error bars, but still, the big picture here is that greater abundance at our restored reef types. However, there is some flipping between gear types here, which is interesting. This is just a graph showing length frequency distribution. So the basically size range, how many fish we catch at a certain size. So I have this in millimeters, but you're seeing here with our Aris, we have a lot of fish around this 200 millimeter range. It's fairly similar across each of our reef types here. Then for gill net, it's a little bit less clean. So here we got a pretty nice distribution, which shows that we're potentially sampling those fish very well. Whereas this gill net is kind of broken up and less, so maybe we're missing some fish here. Also here, I want to mention there's this break in these graphs. What this is around this 550 to 1,000 millimeter range. Those are shark and gar only that we basically snag in our gill nets that we're not actually catching, but I included them here anyway. And I wanted to also mention the scale here. So this is 250 fish, 20, 25%. So in 8 minutes video that we're taking, we're getting so much more fish than we are in 4 hours of soak time with our gill net. So some interesting stuff between here. So the take home message from the science component of this is that oyster catching reefs appear to be developing better reefs currently. Okay. And there's appears to be there's a greater fish abundance at restored reefs and lots larger fish at natural reefs. And so using both acoustic imaging and gill nets together is potentially a good way of sampling this and get an idea of fish better. And additionally, that can be furthered with the help of you guys through volunteer angling and using rod and reels. So this is the opportunity where y'all can get involved. we have a component of this project, which some of you are already participating in, and we greatly appreciate that, where we get anglers to go out and fish these reefs. So we have 9 reefs, and we ask the anglers to go out and fish these reefs. Ideally, you can go out once a month and fish for 30 minutes. So it's 10 minutes or 90 minutes, pardon me. It's 10 minutes per reef, and cast at these reefs using the same tackle during that 1 month. You can switch between different months. But that's something that helps us out. Here's just some instructions, and I can talk to each of you. We're kind of going to hurry up, but afterward, if you're really interested in this, come see me. I'll tell you more detail. This is some instructions for those of you that might be interested in helping with this. You can see what this looks like at high tide and low tide. So this is just a visual reference of kind of how you should cast if you go out and fish at these reefs and participate in this. So we ask that you kind of cast northward of the poles. So all these poles, the south side of the reefs. So all the reefs are to the north. Or if you're looking at it to the left here, there's one reef that would be to your right. But these are all our different reefs. We have them labeled. You can't see here, but yeah. So this is the bridge. This is the bridge here. This is the boat ramp, Rodney J. Hall or Butterbean. Here's a state park. So you can't see that here, but I have these marked off. The red is natural reefs, and that's red. Yellow is bag shell, and then orange is oyster catcher. So that corresponds to the color of tape we have here. And then the number of tape corresponds to the number of wraps. So each of those poles that I showed here that mark it, they have this tape on it. That way you know what reef you're fishing at. And that becomes real important when you get to data entry. And once again, I realize I'm rushing through this, so come chat with me if you're really interested in this. We can talk about it. We have a number of ways of entering data. So this is just a simple sheet that you can take out there with you and record information at each of the reefs, fish you catch, or if you don't catch any fish, you need to record that as well, because it helps us to know that no fish were caught. So you can denote that on your data sheet, or when you send that in to me, you can say, at these reefs we didn't catch them, if you want to save some lines on your data sheet. This has a QR code you can scan. We also have an online data thing where you can enter it in. I'll show this here. You can scan the QR code. It takes you to this website, like an app is kind of our idea, where then you can, it should be rolling. Oh, this is showing making it into a app on your screen. I don't know, it doesn't appear to be working right. So yeah, it pops up here, it makes a little app. You can click on the app, it's on your phone, you can go and start entering. So first you type in your name. I just chose a very generic name here for this. You enter your name in, put the date, it pops down the thing, you can select it, put in your time you caught the fish, or the time you didn't catch your fish. Well, that's great. Then you enter your gear type. So like I mentioned, you want to pick the same gear type in that same sampling event, but it can change within different times you go out. Select the reef you're fishing at. So this was 02. So this would have been the second oyster catcher reef. Would have 2 orange wraps similar to this. Your species. Then you put in the different length measurements. Those are real important for us. Fork length. Red drum doesn't have a fork, so we don't include that there. Total length. Then you can put a weight. If you don't, I know a lot of people don't have a scale on their boat. So if you don't worry about that. But if you do, that helps us out as well. It's also a neat thing about this is it allows you to include a picture of your catch, which is really cool for us to see what you guys are catching. We enjoy that and can throw them in presentations. Then you upload it. And this is on my phone, so you'll see in a second what it does. You press submit. It takes a second. Oh, there's the picture loaded. Now you press submit, pardon me. It does its business, sends it to me, and I actually get notifications on when everything's submitted. Now, you don't have to do this online form. I had the paper form. You can send that to me. A number of you do that. Yep. And that's the thing I was going to close on is we have a sign-up sheet in the back of the room where you can put in some information that I can contact you. What I'm going to do is send basically this packet of information that goes into more detail on this, and it gives you that data sheet and the links for all this and gives you some more rundown of what to do when you want to help out with us. That's in the back of the room here. And also beside that, I have some of those paper data sheets that you can fill out yourself. They're actually writing the rain paper so they can get wet and you can still write on the stuff we use. So those of you that do fish, you might want to pick some up and have them. Yeah, those are the back of the room. I will conclude with that. Feel free to come up and chat with me. appreciate the time, and yeah, I'll take any more questions if I have time. If not, come see me.
Thank you so much, Cameron. And like I said, he's going to be in the back of the room. I'd like to now ask you to please help welcome CCA President Dave DeVore. Dave is going to wrap up the meeting for us.
Hey, Vic. Okay. So, I really appreciate you coming out tonight. We had about 60, 65 and as the year progresses, we're going to be outside more. So for our next seminar, it's going to be Grace Reef will be presenting and their use of robotics, so underwater competition. And then we have a spring excursion we're going to have. We're not sure what it's going to be yet. We'll let you know. It'll probably be with Captain Mike Neal, and he has a boat that takes up to 30 people on it, and he'll be taking us on a tour. So excursions are back. We're going to get outside again. The seminar in April will be fly fishing. So if there's any fly fisher people here, there'll be a seminar in fly fishing, and right after that, there will be a clinic, outdoor fly fishing, and we follow the Orvis model. It'll be run by Doug Painter and Chad DeBose from Rivers and Glen downtown. Then we have a freshwater fishing clinic that'll be coming up, for particularly oriented toward newer residents here on the island. Jeff Harper will be running that, and show you what type of bait to use in the freshwater lagoons. We have our annual banquet on May 3rd, and then we have another seminar coming up on May 9th, and it's regarding not lucky. It's a veteran from, he served one tour in Iraq and 4 tours in Afghanistan. He runs a charter out of Tybee, and he runs a program for wounded veterans with PSTD. And along with that, second half of his presentation will be his catching of a white shark off Wassaw Island last fall. And there'll be a 13-minute video of his catching the white shark and releasing it out there. So a little stimulating. And then we have the Kids Fishing Derby coming up on May 28th. So we have a lot of activities coming up, both seminars, clinics, and excursions. Yes, ma'am. Tonight is the 21st, but that's going to be February. So February and March, when there's 28 dates, have the same date. That's all right. You're paying attention. You're the one that's paying attention. It is the 20th. We had to do. How did we do that? We had to move that one last week. It would have been the 14th, but Land Lovers is having an event on the 14th. We didn't want to compete with that. And so they're having Auction Mania. So we moved this to the 21st. Okay, so that's enough on that. So next it'll be our raffle, I believe, coming up. Jody Patterson, Grace Reef. And now the raffle. Now, Corbin, or Cameron, Corbin's brother, Cameron. So we'd like you to draw for us. Yes. Uh-oh. Want to get a lower half and the upper half of the rain suit? Sure. The whole number, whole number. All right. We got a winner. Great, great, great. So thank you for your presentation tonight. We enjoyed it very much. I'll take it. Good. Thank you. So we hope to see you all here next month on the 21st of March. Thank you. Good.